Hi, welcome to High Output, the podcast exploring how today's engineering leaders are building tomorrow's high-performing teams. I'm your host, William Cheng, and each episode we sit down with visionary engineering leaders who are forging new paths in our rapidly evolving field. Join us as we gain a window into tomorrow's software organizations and discover what's next for our profession and the entire software industry. This episode is brought to you by Maestro AI. Engineering leaders, let's be real. Building high-performing software teams has never been more challenging. You're trying to ship faster, keep your team healthy, and communicate value to stakeholders. That's where Maestro comes in. Maestro enables you to understand everything that's happening in order to improve velocity, spot blockers, and make better decisions faster. Maestro seamlessly integrates with your existing tools like Jira, GitHub, and Slack, so you don't need to change your workflow. Maestro cuts through the noise, revealing exactly who is delivering, who needs help, and where your team is spending time and energy. Visit getmaestro.ai for more info, because you don't know everything, but Maestro does. All right. Our guest today wrote what might be the most famous internal memo in tech history. But that's just a footnote in a career spent solving some of the hardest engineering problems on the planet. Welcome to the show, Steve Yegge. He's an engineering veteran of Amazon, Google, and Grab, and is currently doing engineering and AI magic at SourceGraph. Steve doesn't just build software, he dissects the very culture of how it's built. He's one of the world's foremost thinkers on developer platforms, large-scale systems, and the difficult, messy work of making engineers productive. Let's dive right in. Steve, thanks for joining us.
William, thanks for having me on the show.
Let's get right into it. How did you get into engineering and engineering leadership?
Yeah, engineering and engineering leadership. Boy, I got really lucky and just like picking computer science back in the early 90s, right? When Microsoft had sort of shown everybody that tech was really going to become a big thing, right? So I got in pretty early, and then I got into Amazon really early, which was really cool too. And there was sort of a pattern where if you show some leadership tendencies, companies tend to just give you people and try things out. Why don't you be the tech lead for this? Yeah, okay, take the Uber tech lead position. We'll give you a couple direct reports, and then, gradually you'll Peter Principle up, or you'll decide you don't like it. And most of my colleagues at Amazon, most of them are billionaire class right now, right? Because they started around the same time I did in late 1998, and they're still there now, maybe on the executive team or VPs, senior VPs. And that was just because they decided they were going to dedicate not just their career, but basically their life to being that role, to climbing the ladder and learning how to. One of my buddies, I had lunch with him the other day. He has 30,000 people in his org. Yeah. And we chatted about the first thing I said was, man, you must have great people under you and great people under them. And he was like, yep, So I've only had orgs of about 200 people under me, the highest I've gone. Because I find that as soon as I get far enough away from the code, I start to panic and be like, oh, I'm going to lose my technical edge. And right. So I just hand the whole ball of wax off to a colleague. I'm like, okay, good luck, and they always love it too. They always want it. They're like, oh, I'll take this giant ball of crud. And so it's usually in very good shape. I have a reputation. Actually, I would grow my org. I'm one of the few people who can grow my organization purely through internal transfers from people wanting to come work in my org. I get a reputation for people wanting to work. Yes. So I didn't ever have to recruit externally that much. It's pretty wild. And that was true at Amazon. It was true at Google. But I was like, man, I got to code. So I would go code and I would build stuff. And then I'd be the tech lead, and then I'd get a few more people and gradually, go up again. So, at Amazon, I went through that cycle a few times, and I wound up running customer service tools there, and I wound up running some developer tools there and things like that. At Google, I was like, I'm going to be an IC. I'm going to prove myself to the rest of Google that I'm an engineer worthy of the title before I become a manager. And it took 6 years. It took 6 years at Google. I wound up building a bunch of stuff, but one of those things was Grok, which was code search, which is actually what inspired Bian Lu, co-founder of SourceGraph, to go create SourceGraph, right? Because I built the world's first scalable code search engine, right? Well, actually, my buddies in Munich built the search engine, but I built the scalable knowledge graph that we layered on top of it to make it like an IDE in the sky. And it was unbelievable, right? And after that, people are like, okay, Steve gets it. Steve's an engineer now. And I was like, okay. So then I became a manager and started doing manager stuff. I helped build Google Cloud, basically. And then I worked in Android for a while. And then I went to Grab. I was an executive level leader went through that whole thing. I had never been hired a director before that. So I learned, I can give you all the perspective you want on VPs and senior VPs and execs in those roles. And then at SourceGraph, they hired me as their head of engineering. And I led them through a giant restructuring and a cultural reset where we raised the hiring bar and did a bunch of other stuff, right? It was post-COVID. So I had a lot of experience there. We went through the innovator's dilemma and we had to pivot to AI when that landed, and I took us through that pivot. And then I was like, oh God, I'm forgetting how to code. Like I was like making decisions for this relatively large organization. And I was realizing that coding was changing under me and I didn't understand what was happening very well. And so I told my boss, I'm like, well, once again, I'm ready to hand it off to a colleague. And I handed the whole organization off to Erica Rice-Sherpels. She was working for me at the time, and she's been doing a fantastic job with the engineering org, right? Where I went off to sort of like try to figure out the future. And so I've been an IC for like the last year and a half, about a year and a half now. And I've had a lot of remarkable discoveries that led to the death of the junior developer, which attracted the attention of researchers all over the world. And it was before anybody was talking about the job market cooling down. It was quite a surprise to everybody. So that was an accurate prediction. And then Revenge of the Junior Developer, right, which caught the attention of Anthropic. And I got invited to go see Dario and all this other stuff, right? And so I've got a track record of predictions, and I have some new ones coming. But basically, yeah, and it's because I insist on going back to the ground and being an IC before I let myself get caught up in leadership again. Anyway, that's my intro. Hope that wasn't too long.
No, that's fantastic. Well, would you say, is it a discomfort with, you mentioned discomfort with not knowing how to work with the technical systems, or is it that, you just don't like people or something? Some people are, the real people managers, I feel, they're just like, oh man, I just want to deal with people all day. And there are other people, myself included, who like people, but also really just want to understand the systems. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
I'm a very one-sided leader, like almost one-dimensional. Like what I'm great at is vision and inspiring people, recruiting and motivating people, getting people to do the best work of their careers, bringing out the best in the teams and having teams that are having the time of their lives and building things that are world-changing. And that's all me. When they come to me and they say the dog is sick and they needed this and that, it's just like, I just want to, right, shoot me now. So, and I get it because I'll have a dog, and if the dog is sick specifically, then I'll empathize. But if it's just some random thing, like, you know what I mean? I don't like the people management side of it very much. And I also discovered that as an executive, I've been an executive at 2 different companies now. I don't really like that role. I don't like being an executive. It's not for me. It's not that I don't like executives. I appreciate what we have to do when we are in the executive role, but they are necessarily set up to be in competition and strife with one another, the executive team. It's sales versus engineering versus product versus the business versus marketing versus everybody else. Finance, of course, is versus everyone. And in that sort of intense competition where each executive sort of guards their dimension, maybe overzealously, can lead to, I saw many executives burst into tears, crying. I mean, it's a freaking, right? It's a really, really stressful. You got to be incredibly thick-skinned. And executive teams, of course, can get together and get into an echo chamber really quickly and make really bad, stupid decisions. We've seen that too, I'm not saying that Grab or SourceGraph did. They actually, fortunately, both execute really, really well. In spite of all the strife, you have to find people that want to be in that arena. Yeah. And that was just not for me, right? So I like inspiring people, but I don't like really arguing with people, I guess.
Yeah. Well, is that inherent in the role, or do you think there could be a better way?
As far as I know, this is how it has to be. It's a creative tension. It's just like in engineering, you have a head of security and you have that person's concern is to make sure that everybody else is. And so they're at odds with everybody else in engineering in a sense, because they're saying, whoa, slow down, right? Or your SOC compliance people, right? Or whoever, right? They're at odds too. So you're familiar with this setup, right? QA is at odds with engineering in a sense, right? They're set up that way. And it can be a healthy relationship, but it can also be exhausting. And in engineering, we're kind of used to it, I think, for the most part. But at the executive level, it's much more touchy-feely, philosophical. Are we really spending our money? It's politics, right? Politics is all about resource allocation. And are we spending our money and our time in the right place? And often what it comes down to, if you want a little education into the life of a typical Series D startup, which is what Grab and SourceGraph both were. I went through the IPO with Grab. is they get measured on this annualized recurring revenue, ARR, which is basically how much you're making per year averaged over the year or whatever, right? So if you pick up a customer who's going to be paying you $5 million a year in December, your ARR goes up by $5 million, even though you're only getting a fraction of that for the last month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, ARR becomes a weapon. It becomes weaponized. Mm-hmm. They say, well, you can't piss off this big customer because they're paying us X amount per year. And so we need to do X, Y, Z for them. And so your go-to-market team will say, you have to do this piddling feature that only they want, and it won't help your business at all. And companies can get wrapped around that axle. It's called the innovator's dilemma. They teach it at Harvard, and I was in the middle of it. And boy, oh boy, SourceGraph is quite lean and nimble, and Grab was too for their size, right? Yeah. If you're a big Goliath company like Google or Microsoft, they're going through utter hell right now as their engineering and manager leaders and all their leaders are going through hell because they're stuck in the innovator's dilemma because they're all having to pivot from their nice comfy businesses that they had during COVID to AI. And right, even Google is having trouble with it, as you've seen. So yeah, man, some types of leadership are not for me. I love and appreciate that other people are willing to do it. I'm not saying that politics is bad by any means. Bill Coren, he was a senior VP at Google when I was there early on. He went to Sequoia. He's a brilliant man. And one of the things that he told us was, he says, look, I know you're complaining about the politics, but he said, politics is the best solution that humankind has come up with to this problem in 5,000 years. Okay. The problem of resource allocation. This is how you do it. And so it's like, well, fair point, right?
Yep.
But again, let someone else do it.
Yeah. And I mean, as you said, the other insight you had was when that is your life, right? You can miss some fundamental changes or the view from the ground up, right? You miss the technical considerations, and sometimes you even miss the high level changes that you don't see unless you're actually working on the product and your boots on the ground.
Yeah. And one of the most important principles for leaders at all levels, from your line managers up through directors, VPs, all the way to your executive team. And I learned this at Grab. This was really hammered into us by Anthony Tan, AT. He's the guy that co-founded Grab, and he's the CEO now. And his motto is go to the ground. And he means it. He means get in that car, because Grab is like ride hailing, or they're also food delivery. So order food, right? And they're also payments. So use Grab Pay and do it yourself. Be a customer, right? Be a driver when you can, or sit with the drivers, sit with the sellers, the vendors, and feel their pain, right? Because then as executives, right, you actually kind of get it at a visceral level, right? And a lot of executives don't go through that. Bezos was really big on that too, by the way. He would force us to go work in the call centers and distribution centers, all the leaders, right? From a certain level up. And staying grounded like that, that's one of the keys to being a great leader in any organization. You just don't let yourself get too distant from it and say, oh, well, I know how to kind of do things at a strategically high level, and I'm going to let other people focus on the details. No, right? You want to really be grounded and be there using the product. Maybe you're not looking at the code even. You're too high level for that and too busy, but you got to know, you got to have a bond with your end user, right?
Yeah. Well, pushing back a little bit on that, is that a good or bad thing? I remember I forget which essay you wrote. Maybe it was the platform essay where you said that Bezos, famously scrutinized every pixel to a huge degree, to the point where, his preferences he thought was the right thing. So can you get too lost in the weeds too? Can you go too deep?
Absolutely. Almost anybody who tries to be a Jeff Bezos fails. Jeff Bezos, you look at Jeff and you're like, look, he was successful. And it's because he's freaking Jeff Bezos, right? For all of the success that I've had, I am a tiny gnat, like an ant compared to Bezos. That guy has perspective and vision. And it's gone back into the 90s when he got into his car and drove across country with his wife and his dog. And they had a server in the back of the car that was Amazon.com books before long, right? He was calling stuff that we just straight up thought was BS. We didn't believe in, right? And he was right every single time. And some of it was engineering stuff. He'd be like, no, you're doing it wrong. He's the one that pushed us into the service-oriented architecture. And the reason he did it was, believe it or not, this wasn't in my rant, but I heard this later from a colleague at Amazon. It was that Jeff had come from D.E. Shaw on Wall Street. And D.E. Shaw is a company that buys companies and breaks them up and sells the pieces off for a huge profit. All right. They buy dying companies. And he was worried that Amazon was going to die because this was back, the .com bust and all that,
right.
And he was trying to plan ahead for any contingency. And so what he wanted to do was, as a last resort, his poison pill was, I'm going to bust Amazon up and sell the pieces. Okay.
Yeah.
Which means every freaking one of them has to have a service interface and be talking to each other independently so that they can become independent companies. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, that's the kind of flexibility and modularity, right, that the platform architecture gives you, the service-oriented architecture. And so Bezos, like, you know what I mean? Like forced us to do it.
Yeah.
He had enough technical savvy, right, to know the right thing there. So I'm just saying, like, it's possible to go too far in the weeds. Steve Jobs and Bezos are examples of people who went really far in the weeds and they were almost always right. Almost always. Sometimes Bezos was wrong and he'd fall on his face, right? But he would try stuff until he was sure that he had got it wrong, right? Whereas like at Google, like Marissa Mayer would go into the weeds deeply at the pixel, literally at the font kerning level when she was reviewing our launches for like Google Labs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like at the exact same time, she'd be agonizing over the pixels and telling us we needed to change stuff when Larry and Sergey and Eric Schmidt are all arguing about whether we should even have this project or not. So she was like in the weeds, like, you know what I mean? Like at multiple levels of this metaphorical stack, right? She just was clueless. So yeah, look, so what does that mean? I mean, what does our listener take away from this, right? How do you know how far to go? And the answer is, my God, learn when to let go for starters, right? Learn when to delegate. But yeah, make sure you understand things as well as you can and use AI, lean on AI now. You can. I got a buddy who just started a new job as a manager. Mm-hmm. This is a very common thing. He hasn't been a manager before. This is his first time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he's an engineering manager. And so this is a lot for him, right? He's got to learn the ropes of management and which includes coming up to speed on everything everybody's doing technically. And as a manager, as a leader, you have to stay on top of, you have to learn all the systems and make sure you understand. Because if you can't run the build yourself and maybe submit patches yourself to the code, then there's a layer, I'm not going to call it disrespect, but there's there's definitely a thermal, a respect gradient that goes, and it goes to this massive decline in the buffer zone where you can't code.
Yeah.
Because they know that they're not talking to somebody who can sit over the shoulder and pair program with them. And so the conversation becomes an exercise in translation. And honestly, William, that is why I gave up my head of engineering juicy role, right, at SourceGraph, which I was doing great with and it was working well. But I felt like that I was going through a translation layer with my engineers where they'd be like, well, you see, the AI does this and then I do that and then the AI does that. And then there's a gateway. And I'm like, what? How's it work, right? And then I'd ask a second person and a third person and I'd start triangulating. And I realized, that's a technique that non-technical leaders use, okay? People who've lost their technical chops, they can still be effective leaders, but they have to be very good at triangulating almost like a GPS on the right answer by going to different technical people and getting, right? Well, guess what? You do that with AI now. And I've gave the advice to my friend. I was like, dude, you've got to lean more on AI, on LLMs to help you. Have them help explain the systems. Explain the build system, have them actually set it up and run the build for you, right? And just they'll be your experts because they'll guide you. Again, you're not sure they're going to be 100% accurate, but you can ask a few models. You can ask the question in a few different ways. You can triangulate and eventually you're going to figure it out much faster than you ever would have without the embarrassment of having to go to one of your direct reports or one of your peers and go, I'm really lost, man. There's no docs in the system. How does it work? Right. So the world's a lot better for managers now for that reason.
Yeah. Well, now that you say that, our platforms and the sort of different abstractions between systems and everything, is that as important now in the AI era or just apply AI to it?
It is more important than ever before. Let me tell you why. I've said this on a lot of podcasts, but this is a big deal. Mm-hmm. So as you probably are aware, I have been shouting from the rooftops since February that agentic coding is the future. And I specifically mean sort of CLI-based agentic coding. Mm-hmm. So death of the IDE, right? I haven't launched Cursor or IntelliJ in a long time. Or if you are using it, you should only be using it because it's an outstanding diff viewer and markdown reader and everything else is pointless, okay? And if you haven't made that transition yet where you realize, oh gosh, I haven't opened my IDE except maybe to look at diffs in 2 weeks, you're still an old style programmer. Okay. So it's such a broad topic. And so there's so many little places you can go, but they all lead kind of the same place. So what happens is the director of productivity at OpenAI, his name is Andrew Glover. Okay. And he's been talking to me and Gene Kim, my co-author. We wrote a book called vibe coding because there's a lot to it. And we figured blog posts weren't cutting it. So anyway, he's been talking to us, as have many CTOs and heads of engineering and directors of productivity and all that, telling us how AI is going in their org, right? And I'm sure you're curious to know. And he's actually planning to tell the whole world. They need to get it packaged nicely to tell the story the right way. But they're being pretty open about it. A bunch of their engineers have adopted Codex, which is their coding agent, right? Their CLI, fully agentic, autonomous coding agent. And call it low double-digit percentages, right? We didn't say specifically how many, but it was enough to where all of a sudden now they can start comparing the two groups, the ones who've adopted it and the ones who haven't. They're still using Cursor or Windsurf, right? The old style. And he said that even though more of the pull requests that they submit from the AI side get turned back, the ones that make it through dwarf the contributions of the people who aren't doing agentic coding by an order of magnitude. So they're 10 times as many commits, okay? By whatever measure you want. It's not even close. And so now they have a problem at performance review time, right? What's going to happen? How do you compare the engineers who are 10 times as productive to the ones who aren't? All right. Well, the simple answer is fire all the ones who aren't going to use AI and replace them with ones who will. But it's not that simple, because when they dug into it, they found that the ones who were adopting Codex and were successful with it were the ones, coming full circle to your question, who are living in the microservices world, okay, where there's lots of small, well-factored bits of software. The ones who are struggling are the folks in ChatGPT land, which is one of the world's largest monoliths. It grew astoundingly fast. It attracted 1 billion users in a week, something like that, right? And so it's real ugly. And it's a monolith. And as a result, AI struggles with it because, their context windows, as they're growing exponentially and everything, but still the code bases are very, very large. A picture that's Death Star 2 being constructed in, whatever, was it Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi? Yeah. That's what an enterprise project looks like, and it doesn't matter if you've got a faster shipment. It's a Death Star, right? These things cannot swallow all of ChatGPT Mountain. And so they're like, I can't use Codex. It gets confused. It generates bad code. I can't, the only way that they can solve the problem. And so this team over here is like, the ones using Codex are like, well, you need to use Codex to refactor that mountain of yours, to chip away at it, which you can do. And they're like, well, we're busy, right? They're literally too busy to they're thrashing. Okay. And look, man, they're a very flexible, very fast, very, very together with it engineering organization. Trust me. Okay. And so compare them to a legacy org, a bank or whatever, who's got gazillions of, decades old code that nobody understands and how their AI journey is going. Right. And it's like, first of all, you got to use agentic coding. All right. I mean, but second, I'm going to finally answer your question, man. You need to refactor your code. You need to take a hammer to that monolith. Okay. You've been looking at it for 10 years now, and you've had engineers telling you, we got a big monolith and we got to refactor it to microservices because otherwise, and guess what? They never had an otherwise. It was an empty threat. It was like there was no real downside to a monolith. At Grab, we tried to split our monolith up, right? The routing service, the one that, that allocates riders to drivers, right? That one is a huge monolith, and there's a gazillion unrelated services that piggyback on it and go on its deployment cycle and everything. But that's super convenient because it's well vetted and QA'd, and you don't have to worry about anything. You're just coding, and it just floats off and gets deployed somewhere, right? Monoliths are lovely for engineers, except otherwise just showed up at our doorstep. The otherwise, the else clause, right? That oops, right? You didn't refactor it. And so what we're faced with right now is this rat race where, first of all, everyone who's already in microservices land is just, they're being pigs. They can use all the tokens they want. AI is working for them beautifully, right? They're vibe coding. The ones with monoliths, and you just point at any company and they have a monolith. Oracle, monolith, MongoDB, monolith, any database company, monolith, right? Google, search, monolith, Microsoft, Bing is a monolith. I mean, right? Everyone's got their monoliths. It's time to break them up. because AI's, I don't think, going to be smart enough to really wrangle them for like a couple of years. And in that time, the ones who are able to move fast with AI are going to get an exponential drop on you. And you just don't want that, right? So like everyone is now faced with a big dial. And I'm going to end with the big dial. All right. I've explained the dial before, but I'm going to bring it up every time. Every company, you've been given a dial that goes from 0 to 100. And it is the number of engineers that you're going to fire 0 to 100% in order to pay for the rest of them to have AI. Because once you finally figure out how coding is done today, right now, not in the future, but right now with Codex, with Claude Code, with SourceGraph AMP, if you're especially hip, it's got a lot of advantages over the other ones. Or even with the Amazon one or the Gemini one, right? Any fully agentic, there's a bunch out there, right? As soon as you switched into that world, you are, I mean, like, well, I'll tell you some of my predictions down the road, right? But I mean, like, you're playing in the big leagues and everyone else is like falling behind.
Well, do you think, hearing you go through that, do you think that startups or smaller companies have more of a chance now, right? Like, is it faster to actually build something from scratch with agentic coding rather than think like a Microsoft or, I don't know, Chase or something, like refactoring some of their stuff? That'll take forever.
It's a brilliant observation. Everybody's like, well, coding was never the bottleneck. And actually coding is the bottleneck, because now that the bottleneck has been removed, the bottleneck is moving downstream. Okay. And where is the bottleneck? Where does it wind up in the organization? It immediately hits the code review wall. If you've got engineers generating 10 times as much code, the very first bottleneck is code review. But you can use agents and stuff to like work your way through that one and even through deployments. But then surprisingly, your bottleneck goes wham and it hits human beings. And humans become your bottleneck and your business processes. So yeah, we're going through this wild phase right now where everybody is like learning the hard way how AI is affecting their company, because you can code really fast. And for companies that aren't nimble, which is probably most of them, the problem with companies is they get super dialed in. The innovator's dilemma in a nutshell is that your company optimizes for efficiency. Okay. And so that means getting rid of all the fat. It means getting rid of anything that isn't perfectly tuned for doing what your company does today, right now. And that now you're perfect. The problem is if your company now suddenly has to do something different, you have no buffer, you have no slack, you have no budget, you've trimmed all the fat, you've tuned yourself to make a machine, and now you need a different machine. And this machine will start to owl like nobody's business. It will scream like a banshee if you try to change anything. This is the innovator's dilemma, and it kills companies. And it's going to be worse than ever right now because things can move so fast. And like you say, startups can build things real fast right now. So we're going to see a strange, like, proliferation of big name brands that appear overnight that are competing with companies that are struggling. Like, and this happened in Southeast Asia, honestly. Why the reason I joined Grab wasn't for the ride hailing. It was because their banking app overnight became the biggest banking app in Southeast Asia, like in a matter of a couple of months. And it's because, strangely enough, Southeast Asians don't trust banks. That's not the strange part. They don't trust banks because they're horribly corrupt. And it's a cash economy and they keep their cash in their mattresses. But they do trust apps on their phones. And so they trust in Grab Pay and Grab Banking. And so, yeah, the whole user trust thing is kind of a really interesting angle to it. But
interesting. Okay. Well, based on what you said, right, around AI agents being so good and everything, and you've written a bit about this, but just would love to get your thoughts live here. Are we not going to need people, or are we going to need less people? Like, or are there going to be like more companies? Like, where do you see this heading?
I think something astonishing is happening that people don't fully have their heads wrapped around yet. And the astonishing thing that's happening is that it's just like digital photography made everybody a photographer. Pictures used to be quite rare and hard to come by. And when I was a kid, like in the 70s, you just don't have a lot of pictures, but now they're just commonplace. But it's more than just that. It's a creative medium, and it's more than just pictures. It's movies, and it's more than movies. We've elevated ourselves to where there's an entire TikTok and YouTube are the creator economies, right? Around creating media that just started with a digital photography revolution. Well, what's happening now, and we're at the very beginning of it, so people don't really understand yet, is that everybody will be able to create software just like everybody's able to create pictures now, okay? And when everybody can create software, that actually creates opportunities and jobs and money moving and so on. And what's going to happen is now You're going to have millions of people creating software, and you're going to be paying for it pennies at a time. However, but you're going to have software to solve all sorts of like problems that never got solved for you before, right? And it's going to be a renaissance. It's going to be absolutely unprecedented. The way I look at it, we've moved from like the old style pictures with a dude with a thing over his head looking through a lens to digital phones. Okay. The next phase of picture evolution is in Hogwarts, the pictures talk, right? In Harry Potter land, the pictures talk. That's where we're going. Okay. You're going to be able you can do it today, right? I'm sorry. You're going to get me ranting and yelling. You could literally sit down today as a non-programmer and you could get SourceGraph AMP or Claude Code or whatever. And just with a little bit of like poking and prodding, you could make yourself an application that makes a talking picture like a Hogwarts style one with whatever animation you wanted. And it would have whatever personality you wanted because it would be talking to an LLM in the back to pretend to be whatever, wizard you want or whatever, right? You see what I'm saying? So, I mean, like we're there. The talking pictures are now. People don't really understand what it's going to mean when everybody can create software. And certainly it's going to be wild. But I mean, like, we will still live in a world where multiple people working together can create bigger software and better software. It will still be easier when there's multiple humans involved. But it will be a world in which, and researchers seem to be arguing over whether we're going to call this a chimera or a centaur. So pick your favorite Dungeons and Dragons mythological, creature. But they're going to be human AI collaborators. We will, even doing this kind of recording or whatever, all knowledge work will eventually soon be done in collaboration with AIs. That'll be your partner doing it all. And that includes programming. And that's the way it works today. And a lot of people are struggling with that, but I'm excited. And by the way, I should just give you a short answer to your question, which is lots of jobs, lots of software. Everybody will have opportunities. I think.
I love that take. And it reminds me, the people were saying, years ago, right? Like, oh, cold jobs are going away. Just learn to code. And that was a bit silly back then, right? Because they're not going to learn how to code. But now maybe they can. So
absolutely they can. I mean, like Jeeb Kim and I were so close in our vibe coding book to saying, screw it, we're going to open up the audience to everyone, right? Because it's where you could teach a non-technical person. I mean, certainly tech adjacent roles, people who've, like agile coaches and people like tech writers and QA, product managers, anybody with a little bit of engineering savvy, whatever, they're all able to code now and they do, right? I mean, like, dude, what we see inside of companies, almost every role now, SDRs, for marketing outbound, we see financial analysts, UX designers, UX researchers, sales. We see all these people vibe coding up SaaS software inside, for their own bespoke purposes, for their own workflows. And often it's to replace commercial proprietary software that they were paying for. And they were coming up to a re-up and they were like, we hate this stupid software, right? But this company had found a niche. They had built some software. They're the only player in that niche. They're gouging you. The software is not good, but it's the only thing you can use. People are saying, forget it. We're going to write our own. And they're doing it without even an engineer. Okay. And then what happens is they say, okay, we're ready to launch this, but maybe we ought to talk to a human engineer first and see if it's ready. Yeah. And so they go to a human engineer, any human engineer. It could be a junior engineer, right? But because they're a trained engineer, they can look at it and they can give it that once over and say, okay, this is, if they're familiar with the company's production systems, they say, okay, yeah, you might need to make these changes or go talk to this person. And we saw this, a couple of people got their system approved to replace some vendor SaaS. Yeah. So we're moving to a world where everyone at the company codes. Everyone at the company codes. And I view it as so another thing that Jeff Bezos was right about, okay, that we all hated him for, and he was right and we were wrong, was two pizza teams. Okay. He invented the two pizza team, which was, it's a team that was small enough to be fed by two pizzas and they would have a single business goal. They actually had an objective function, a fitness function that they had to drive up and to the right of some weighted terms that they had to instrument, put in the telemetry and measure it. And then report on their progress back to Jeff. Were they making progress? And I led one of the first two pizza teams. The first batch included a two pizza team for customer contact reduction. And since I was running customer service tools at the time, I was the engineering lead for that team. And there was a business leader and there were other people on the team. And our goal, we got together and met, and it was a war team environment. And we had Jeff Bezos tickets to go hand out to say, you got to get out of our way. We need to make this change. Now, why did they exist and why did he need them? The answer is that companies struggle with siloing and the resulting difficulty of cross-functional coordination and getting projects rolled out across silos. But Amazon's business was trying to be flexible and continually grow. And so he was trying to break all the silos as we went. And so technical program managers were our go-to solution. TPMs are really valuable, they're engineers who have switched into project management roles. They have great people skills, and they're ultimately accountable for launching company-wide initiatives. And they work with the business owners and the product people and all that, right? TPMs are great. I was a TPM at Amazon my first year there before I went into management, believe it or not. All right.
Wow.
Yeah, I could talk all day about TPMs. They're great. It's a great role. But there are certain initiatives that even a TPM just doesn't have the clout to get across. And so he came up with 2 pizza teams. And the 2 pizza teams, we actually did get customer contacts reduced. I have many amazing stories about that lifetime. But anyway, they're experiencing a resurgence now. They're actually coming evolutionarily. They're emerging out of companies now as a bunch of people across the business realize they need to solve a problem that's crowding across, there's a financial analysis pipeline, and there's an engineering data pipeline, and there's like a UX front end something, the product people. And so they just get together and they say, we're going to solve this problem as a team, and we're going to vibe code the solution together. And they have a shared artifact and shared rights. And I'm telling you, they get stuff done. And this is the new normal. This is the new working model. Yeah. And it's exciting as hell. Where is it going? It's going to a world, like I said, centaurs and chimeras. Everybody's going to have AI helpers. And so like the way you get ahead of this and the way you become the new knowledge worker and the new economy, the way you get ready for it is make sure that you know how to use AI, like at the cutting edge, and honestly, Claude Code and friends, SourceGraph, AMP, all of them, they're basically like OpenAI operator. They can do anything. People don't understand. They're not just about coding. They'll help you install software and configure your computer and debug issues and freaking send emails and whatever. They can open up browsers and manipulate websites, and they can use your software. They are your companion. And that's why I was shocked when I asked my friend who's a new manager, are you using AI to help you find your way around the code base? And he's like, it's like, dude. Okay. So I say to you, dear listener, right? Would I be looking at you and your lack of AI and be going, dude or dudette, come on.
Well, I want to play back 2 things you said during the conversation. One thing you said was you think there is an opportunity for a lot of different startups, a lot of different businesses and everything, right? But then another thing you just said
I have like 5 projects I'm working on right now. There's too many. We're back in the land of, I felt like we were stagnated about 5 years ago, but we're back in the land of there's more ideas than people. So yeah, we're going to see an astonishing number of startups.
So, okay. But then why don't big companies just monopolize all that? And if they can build everything themselves, why not just build everything they need themselves? Like, why do they need to buy from a startup?
Companies they weigh that. It's an executive team decision, and they look at how much spare engineering capacity. Do they have the right experts in-house? Are there any competitors readily for sale, et cetera? This is how Meta wound up buying Scale AI, which was like a big rubber mallet pounding the ant to the industry, I tell you, because everyone was relying on Scale AI, and Meta was like, no, it's ours now, gobble, right? So you're going to see it's all part of the circle of life in the industry. You're going to see a lot of startups get gobbled up. Somebody will start a startup and sell it for $1 billion 3 months later. I mean, it's probably already happened, but right? We're in that world now. So a short answer is, okay, let me back up. At Google, one time Sergey talked to us at TGIF, and he said, look, we've got this pattern that we've noticed, which is that people keep quitting Google to do a startup, and the startup is really successful, and we buy them, and then they're back at Google again, working on their thing, and we wound up having to pay a bunch of investors a bunch of money that could have kind of been split between us, you and us, right? So why don't we just pay you to do the startup internally? This is right. This was early days, but it was like Google's trying to invest in that kind of a mentality. So I forget why I was telling that story now, but what a great story. It's because right now, man, we're in that zone where it's a magical time where, dude, there's so much money out there right now. You can get funded. If you're listening to this program, and you're like, man, I got a startup idea. And if you don't have a startup idea, you haven't been talking to people lately, because there's a lot going on, right? And so, I could do 4 or 5 startups right now, please. And so man, go get the money, because I'm telling you, the AI will help you write your pitch deck. I mean, like, seriously, they're probably like, I mean, at this point, the investors are inundated with pitches, over at Hacker News and Y Combinator, not Hacker News, Y Combinator, but they're using AI to get through the pitch decks, and it's just an arms race, right? Just jump in now, right? Because I mean, man, you can vibe code things so quickly now, right? And it's getting exponentially faster. So like, you could wait a little while and it'll be easier, but why not start now, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, all your questions are related together, right? Like, the job market and the modularity of your company and the adoption of the AI and, the sort of like the way roles are changing. We're in this massive shift, but it's an acceleration. Everybody's speeding up. In fact, the hardest part of vibe coding, I'll tell you, the hardest part of vibe coding is learning when to slow down and having the willpower to slow down, because you've suddenly gone from like walking up and down mountains to skiing down mountains. And, it can be real easy to like not realize how hard a tree can hit you when it's your first time. And so Gene and I wound up writing this book about it because the workflows get rather involved trying to keep these things on the rails, right? But it's the new normal, man. I mean, like, look, even if AI plateaued today, and I see news articles, people go, AI is plateaued, it's not getting any smarter. Even if it wasn't getting any smarter, it's already powerful enough that you can treat it like steam or electricity or fire and say, all right, well, it's a force. We need to put reliable, wrapping, scaffolding around it, right? That's just engineering. That's what we do. We've done it for hundreds of years, and this is no different. And so the engineering is coming, right? That we're building it to put guardrails around this powerful helper, and it doesn't need to get any better. Now, the funny thing is it actually will get better. According to Moore's law, we have at least 36 more months. The researchers believe that we're going to have, right? Like, for example, Jason Clinton, CISO at Anthropic, told me and Gene told us at actually a forum in April that cognitive AI, cognitive power has been following Moore's law trajectory of, roughly 4x improvement every 18 months for decades. And they have every reason to believe that this will continue for 2 more 18-month cycles. So that means AI is going to be 16 times smarter in 3 years, right? What does that mean? Well, that's a lot smarter than it is today, right? Now, is it smart enough to build the Death Star in one pass? No. Enterprises will always create software mountains that are larger than any even superhuman intelligence is going to be able to absorb in one bite.
Mm-hmm.
So just because we have superhuman intelligence doesn't mean that we should be scared or anything. We should be happy because it will help us with these superhuman problems that we're creating, right? But this is where we're headed, and a lot of people are scared of it and they don't know what to do. But the answer is you have to just be aware that the AI is going to do more and more of your job for you, which means you're going to be pushed up higher and higher on the stack. You are going to become a leader. And it's really interesting, tying full circle to what we first started talking about, right? With, around leadership and whether you like people management and whether you like the motivation part, whether you like the technical parts, which parts you like. As a vibe coder, once you switch to agentic coding and you've got 5 coding agents running, okay? And this orchestration is the new world for IDEs. This is where IDEs are headed. You will have an IDE open. It's just going to be orchestrating a dozen agents at once, right? Once you get into that world, you're now a movie director. You're like the role of a director at a company. Your goal is to have a vision and execute that vision. And you're no longer worried about the implementation that much, except as the most senior engineer in your little org of just you and a bunch of AIs, you have to make sure that it holds your quality bar. But you can do that using the techniques that we outline in the book. Yeah. So yeah, man, it's a new world. I'm shocked that people haven't adopted it. A lot of people still haven't yet. A lot of close friends, developers, they're still using Cursor and they're using AI on the side as a sort of sidecar helper once in a while to maybe generate some code. And they go, ooh, that was nice. I'm going to go back to coding by hand now, right? That world is gone, man.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah. Okay. So then last question, given all the changes and how everything's moving, how do you prepare for this new world?
I'll give you one bit of advice. It's going to be just timeless and universal, and it will go so long towards helping you. Practice reading code. Learn the art of reading code. Master the art of reading and understanding code. And I mean reading through lots of code quickly or looking at little bits of code. More at a macro level, but understanding code bases, okay? With AI's help. But the reason is you're going to be generating 10 to 100 times as much code as you ever did before. And you're going to need to read it at some point because you need to own it. It's your code. Yeah. And so it's a muscle that you can build, a cognitive muscle. So spend time with it every single day. Like if you're a musician and you can practice sight reading a few minutes every day, you get better at it. Same thing with code reading. Yeah, I would highly encourage it. Just go force yourself into the habit. And the easiest way to do it is to get a coding agent like SourceGraph AMP, give it a coding problem, and then just sit there and watch it. Turn off permission checks so you don't have to hit enter all the time, and just watch it. Watch it code. Pay attention to the diffs, okay? And it's going to exhaust you, and you're going to need to get a cup of coffee, and you're going to need to take a break, and you're going to be like, right? Reading code is so much less rewarding than writing code. But then you're going to get strong. You're going to get good at it. And you're going to realize that you're much more productive this way, and that writing code is for agents, not for you. And then you're going to succeed in the new economy. Yeah. So There you go. That's my advice to you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Steve. You've given us a lot of insights, managed to tie together a lot of different thoughts as well. I've had a great time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me on the show. I hope you guys enjoyed this.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of High Output. If today's conversation was useful, please take a moment to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Engineering leadership is evolving rapidly, and we're committed to bringing you insights from the front lines every week. Visit getmaestro.ai/high-output for show notes, transcripts, and past episodes. Until next time, I'm William Cheng, and this has been High Output, where we explore how today's engineering leaders are building tomorrow's high-performing teams.